It says that during this Torah portion, that when the sons of Jacob told Shechem that he and all the members of his city-state had to be circumcised so that he could marry Dinah, the Shechem legal team asked, what is the oldest date that someone can get circumcised? Is there a cutoff date? Okay, so welcome to Vayishlach. Now, my son and I, we watched this 3-year series on Nickelodeon called Avatar: The Last Airbender. Have you guys seen it? It's a great cartoon. Last 3 years, and it's the old 3 years where it would have like 25 episodes a season. So you actually got to know the characters and got to love them. And it's a pretty tight storyline. There's only a couple of the throwaway episodes that I can remember. But anyway, the best part of the series, aside from the wisdom of Uncle Iro, which if you know the series, I mean, the guy is just, Mako is the Japanese actor who did the voice for Iro, and just a great character. But the best character, however, is Prince Zuko. Dante Bosco did the voice of him. And the series starts with Prince Zuko being this young man whose shame transformed him into a guy with uncontrollable rage. But at the end of the series, he becomes a hero who saves the world. Character development is very important. It lets us know that the axiom that we live with, that people don't change, is not always necessarily true. In the Torah, we have several characters who don't have any character development whatsoever. Whether they're good guys or bad guys, what you see is what you get. And even when they're a good guy, if there's no character development, that's okay. Because often those characters show up and then they disappear. They're there for a short time and we see them just as they are. But there are some characters that you can see them grow from here to there. And off the top of my head, we have Noah, Yaakov, Yehuda, Joseph, but kind of to a smaller extent, Joseph. But we also have Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech, and of course, Shaul of Tarsus. All those guys begin here and end up there. And most of the time, it's for the good. Now, Noah, of course, he ends up getting PTSD, and we see that in the text when he gets drunk. I mean, if you think about it, going from a world of X number of people to whatever, that had a psychological effect on him. But the character that did the most growth of anybody is in today's Torah portion. Of course, that is Yaakov. Now, his story began in Parsha Toledos, which is Parsha number 6, and his story ends in Parsha Vayechi, which is Parsha number 12. So he's in like a little bit more than half of the book. To help tell his story, the Torah arranges it in a chiastic format. Have you guys ever heard of chiastic structure? Okay, well, chiastic structure is, they often say, well, it's it's A, B, C, B, A, or A, A, B, B, A, A, or something along that lines. And let me give you an example, okay? I left my house and it was rain. I left my house, that's A. B is it was raining. C, I went to a party and I met a beautiful girl and we got along. So then I went home, happy that I got her phone number and it was still raining. And when I got home, I couldn't sleep because I was happy. So the structure is the A's are my house. B is it's raining, and C was everything in between, which is the party. So that would be arranged in like an A, B, C, B prime, and A prime, because something, it wasn't just the same as A, there was growth. So that's what we have with Yaakov. To my knowledge, and of course I reserve the right to be wrong, the chiastic structure is also considered poetry. Now, as you know, the Bible is all full of poetry, and somebody once said just earlier today, well, how about haiku? Now, I don't know if there's any haiku in the Torah. That might be an interesting thing. You know, personally, I don't do haiku, but I do like ironic twists. I am conflicted. That, of course, is a haiku. But the chiastic pattern is literary technique that layers words, phrases, or dialogues in that A-B-A structure. Some of these structures are more complex than a simple A-B-B-A, and they are represented with a prime, which shows development. Now, the chiastic structure shows up at least 10 times in the book of Bereshit alone. But Jacob is the most complex that I've been able to find. And there are actually 12 layers before you get to the center. Now, all this, if you set it up like an outline, I have A and 1 and this lowercase a. If you set that up, then right in the center is all these point to the center, and there is a center to this. So the first layer, which would be an A, I'm not going to sit here and do A, B, and C, but the first one is before they're done or before they're born, there's a struggle between them. Okay, that comes from chapter 25, verse 22. And after their deaths, the back end of this chiastic structure, their offspring struggle, and we are still struggling to this day. Layer number 2 is the younger held onto the heel of the older, and that again is from chapter 25. And near the end of this chiastic structure, Yaakov held onto the Malach and would not let go. Layer 3. Yaakov was a passive man living in tents, 27. But through his adversity, he becomes a man who confronts his brother and his 400 men. He's still scared out of his boots, but he has now become an active character instead of a passive character. Now Rivka, layer number 4, Rivka tells Yaakov to steal Esau's blessing. And she says, upon me be your curse. Remember that? That comes from chapter 27. In Bereshit 35:8, Yaakov receives news that Deborah, the Meneches of Rivka, which probably means nurse or maidservant, that Rivka has died. That Deborah has died. Now, Bereshit Rabbah in chapter 85 or 81 tells us, and Ramban quotes this as well, says that the Torah is referring actually to the death of Rivka. For why would Yaakov weep so much for a nurse? Rather, it was his mother who died very soon after Deborah who caused this flood of tears. So how are these two events tied together? Esau said in his heart, the day is at hand, or the day of my father's death is at hand, and I will kill Yaakov, my brother. Who dies? It's not Yaakov, it's Rivka. So there's development there. That's my point there. Number 5, Yaakov receives Esau's blessing, steals it. And that's in chapter 27. Chapter 33, Yaakov, when he meets his brother, after giving all these gifts, he says, take, please, my blessing. Hak na es berchasi. So, and he was referring to these gifts as blessings. Number 6, yeah, pretty cool, isn't it? Number 6, Yaakov is given a derogatory name by his brother. Yeah, and he says he's rightly so called Yaakov, which means heel, which is a derogatory term. But the Malach, when he's wrestling with the Malach gives Yaakov a new name, and that new name is Israel. And that comes from chapter 32. So Yaakov traveled, and when he left his father's house, he travels and dreamt of a malachim on a 4-tier sulam. I know we like to think that it's a ladder with, multiple things, but all the rabbis seem to indicate that there's really only 4 steps, kind of like a terrace. And that's in chapter 28. And in chapter 32, Yaakov wrestles in a dreamy ethereal landscape where he eventually is injured in his Gid Hanasha. I tell you what, there's a lot of different interpretations of what a Gid Hanasha is. But as you know, we don't eat the sciatic nerve because of this. So, he dreamt of an angel when he left, he dreamt of an angel as he's going back. Hashem blesses Yaakov shortly after he wrestles with the angel, after the Sulam, and that's in chapter 28. And he blesses Yaakov again in chapter 32 after the wrestling match. Number 9, Yaakov vows to keep a 10th to Hashem, but it's conditional. And the condition is, God will be with me. He will keep me in this way that I shall go. Will give me bread and give me raiment. So I come back to my father's house. Then Hashem will be my God, and this stone shall be a house of God. And that's in chapter 28. So the Malach of Hashem reminds Yaakov of this vow and instructs him to return home. And what's interesting, from what I can tell, the promise is the 10th. But he also erects a pillar and calls it Beit-El. So perhaps that is part of the vow as well. Number 10, Yaakov journeys from home, chapter 29. And in chapter 31, Yaakov is journeying from Haran. So you can tell things are getting closer. By the way, how long was he away from home? Does anybody know? Was it 20 years? Or was it 34? Yeah, the answer is yes. Depending on how you do the chronology. I'm one who thinks it's 34. Okay, in number 11, Lavan deceives Yaakov with his wives, and that's in chapter 29. So, on the other end of the chiastic structure, Yaakov stole away his family and all of his possessions, not Lavan's possessions, and that's in chapter 31. And please note that, well, actually, let me ask you a question. How many daughters did Yaakov have? That's a great answer. But we know that it was at least 2. Why? Because Lavan says, the daughters are mine and the sons are mine. But we're only told of the birth of Dinah, just because that created a really interesting backstory. It also reiterates the fact that Israel is considered a nation at this point, not just a family. The last one, number 12, the wife swap. At the beginning, he worked 7 years to marry Rachel, and he wakes up in the morning after probably a pretty good drunk and discovers that Leah is now his wife. So he had to basically go through the 7 days of that marriage. After that 7 days, not 7 years, but after that 7 days, he marries then Rachel, and then he works another 7 years for Rachel. And then he works he works 6 more years for his cattle. But anyway, the wife swap is the first part of the chiastic structure. The second part of the chiastic structure is a story where Leah comes home and she has a bouquet of flowers. Sometimes it says mandrakes in the translations, but it's dudayim. So what Rachel says, let me have those, and Leah says, no, I want an evening with Yaakov. So there is a wife swap there, but this time it's above board. Everybody knows. Leah comes to Yaakov and says, I have purchased you for the night. Another wife swap. Yeah, it's like, how do you do? One wife, dudes, really, one wife. So that is that's a chiastic structure, and it all points to the center. And the center is all the adversity that he had when he was living in the house of Lavan. So there we have a B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, and then M would be all the adversity, and then you go backward from there. And I thought about trying to do Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, but there's an interesting thing that I discovered. There is a really cool word, and I know you can remember this. It is called abecedaries. A, B, C, D, abecedaries. And what that is, that basically means alphabetical order. Abecedaries. So I was going to use the one for Hebrew, but then I thought, well, which one am I going to use? Why do I ask that? Is because the order of the Hebrew alphabet has changed through time. So what we have right now is not the way that it used to be back in the time of Yeshua. It's different. And they've been able to determine that some of these documents that we have from the Dead Sea Scrolls actually are pretty close to the alphabet that we had at the time of the events. And in particular is 4Q Lamentations, which it has another name though. I think it's 4Q 111. I think is the name that it has now. And the abecedary in that one is so early that they think that was actually written or was copied from a scroll that happened just shortly after the events. The chiastic structure. So he is in Laban's house for all this time. And with each lie and with each devaluation of his wage and with each modification of the deals that the two of them have, Hashem guides the hand of Yaakov, leading him to success. I mean, read the story about the lambs and the coloring and the mottled and the striped, and it's amazing. So what does he learn here? He learns how to deal with hard people. He learns how to negotiate. He learns how to listen. He learns how to temper his anger, just like Zuko. And he learns to love and to open himself up to love. But most importantly, he learns what we all need to learn. He learns to rely on the hand and the unalterable promises of Hashem. Good Shabbos.